Canadian tariffs in particular, what will they end up taxing? They'll tax groceries and food products. They'll tax building supplies at a time when home prices are too high already. They will tax fertilizer to our farmers. About 80% of the potash that is used by our farmers for fertilizer comes from Canada. They will tax our national security industries. 35% of the aluminum and steel that go into the ships and subs that we build in this country come from Canada. We're already having a hard time producing ships and subs on time, on budget. This will make it worse. President Trump is saying that there's an emergency with Canada. Canada is a friend, not an adversary. Canada is a sovereign nation, not a 51st state. And while we always have challenges with friends, we have a mechanism that Donald Trump negotiated, the USMCA, that enables us to work through trade deals, and we don't need tariffs at all. The president has justified the imposition of these tariffs on, in my view, a made-up emergency. Fentanyl is a real emergency in this country. Let's be clear about that. Fentanyl is a real emergency. But as President Trump's national security advisor, Tulsi Gabbard, testified before Mark's Intel Committee last week, the fentanyl emergency is from Mexico and China. It's not from Canada. She presented a threat assessment that had nothing about Canada as a threat, that had nothing about Canada as a fentanyl threat. 21,000 pounds of fentanyl interdicted from Mexico coming into the United States last year, a maximum of 43 pounds from Canada. They're actually digging into that number and finding it's probably dramatically less even than that. So why invent this emergency? The emergency is being invented to do the tariffs, to do the taxes on everyday Americans. Why? So they can use the tariff revenue to give a tax cut to billionaires. You saw the Trump tax cut in term one. They did it off deficit financing. They don't want to deficit finance it again. They want to pay for it. How are they going to pay for it? Massive cuts to programs like Medicaid and Medicare and tariffs imposed on the backs of everyday Americans. They'll put that together, and then that will be the pay for this tax cut bill that we see coming. We need to stand strong against a tax increase, the largest tax increase in American history, on our consumers. We need to stand strong for a strong relationship with a good ally, Canada, and that's why I'm really, really excited we have this vote coming up. It's going to be close. Again, it's likely to slip from today into tomorrow, but we feel really good about stakeholders like AFL-CIO, steel workers, machinists, and we think we're going to have some industry groups coming out today also in support of our legislation. With that, I'm really happy to be here with our leader on the Democratic side, who's been really strong in pushing this. Please welcome a guy with his own border with Canada, New Yorker, Chuck Schumer.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Tim. And first, let me thank Tim and his co-sponsors, Amy and Mark. Tim has done an amazing job here. He has been persistent. He has been focused. He knew how important this was even a month or two ago, before we saw the menace of all these tariffs. So Tim deserves a lot of credit from Virginians and from Americans for getting this issue to the point where we now will have a vote on it. And the Republicans are squirming because they know very simply that tariffs are simply a tax increase. Let's listen to one of them, Senator Mullen. He said tariffs is a tax and it will be passed on to consumers. Rand Paul said tariffs are simply a tax. And here's the most galling thing. President Trump says, quote, "I couldn't care less if prices go up to American families." America, you hear that? Donald Trump says he couldn't care less if you pay more. And it's not just a little. The estimates go as high as $6,500 more for the average American family. To the family that's sitting down Friday night and trying to figure out, do they have enough money to go on that vacation, or to visit grandma, or maybe to buy a car? Take away $6,500 and those dreams are out the window. And Trump couldn't care less? Give me a break. Give me a break. And so many jobs will be lost. In New York alone, we estimate that over 200,000 jobs could be lost. We have the Canadian border. In a city called Plattsburgh, on the northern border in Clinton County, 20% of the companies are Canadian-owned or Canadian-affiliated. Plattsburgh will just go into deep recession if this happens. So we're not going to we're going to do everything we can to fight. And oh, the most galling thing of all, why is he doing this? As Tim outlined, it's not fentanyl. You know, they always make up an excuse because they have no justification for what they're really doing. In this case, They say fentanyl, but the amount of fentanyl that comes over the Canadian border is minuscule. They're doing it so they raise revenue so they can give tax cuts to the billionaires like everything else. The whole government is geared, whether it's Social Security or Medicaid or Medicare or housing or agriculture, the whole government is geared to create dollars that can give tax breaks to the billionaires. And one final thing. Yes, are there certain areas where tariffs might be needed? Yes, it should be pinpointed in specific areas. But typical of this administration, they use a blunderbuss instead of a scalpel. They use a hatchet instead of a scalpel.
Chainsaw.
They use a chainsaw instead of a scalpel. Thank you, Tim. And they just go after everything with huge destruction for the American people. You know, I've been a China hawk, and the kind of sort of imposing broad tariffs on China, which really has hurt us in trade every step of the way, makes sense. To do that to Canada, our friend, who our economies, our interrelated economies depend on each other, makes no sense whatsoever. But this administration makes no sense when it comes to tariffs. One final point. I've talked to New York business people. They hate uncertainty. Whether you're a small business person, a middle-sized business person, or a big business person. And the tariffs are so uncertain, so chaotic, such a mess, that business people are pulling back. So are consumers. They're saying, I don't know what's going to happen. I better not spend on that extra plant or hiring that, training that extra worker. So this is just a nightmare for the American economy, a nightmare for the American worker, a nightmare for American businesses. We're going to fight it every step of the way. Thank you, Tim.
And now my co-sponsor on this from Minnesota, another great border state, Amy Klobuchar.
Thank you, Tim. This is a big moment because this resolution really sets a line in the sand, and it says you cannot abuse your emergency powers to start an unjustified trade war. You cannot abuse your emergency powers, President of the United States, to hurt the relationship, one of the finest relationships in the world, the relationship between the United States of America and Canada. And you cannot drive up prices and risk jobs and put in place a national sales tax when you look at all the tariffs together, not just Canada, now predicted by experts to be at about $5,000 a year for the average family in America. So I first come at this as a Minnesotan, yes, a border state, with all respect to Virginia. We can see Canada from our porch. And for us, Canada is our #1 trading partner in the state of Minnesota. It actually eclipses #2, #3, and #4 combined. That's how much work we do. We are the 4th biggest exporting state for agriculture in the country. And so this is a major hit for northern tier states. I'm not surprised at all that Susan Collins has joined you in supporting this, Senator Kaine, because for northern states this is a huge deal. Secondly, I come at it as the chair of the Canadian-American Interparliamentarian Group, go to Canada a lot. Remember well that it was Canada, the Canadian Embassy, that had the words draped on their banner on front of their embassy, friend, ally, partner, the only one when times were tough for America, and the respect that other countries had for us. They have been our ally through times good and bad. They're the ones that when 9/11 happened, when our trade center went down, it was Canada that was the first country showing up at our side, being there, volunteering, helping out. This is a long-standing friendship and an incredible trade relationship, part of our supply chain. As we looked at how we picked up after the pandemic, that was such an important part of picking up our industry again and how disruptive this will be. Third thing is, as ranking member on the Agriculture Committee, I see what this will do to us, how it adds to the cost of planting an acre of corn, an acre of soybeans, because as Tim mentioned, the fertilizer issues, all of the trade and supply chains we have back and forth. I was a strong supporter and am a strong supporter of the USMCA. I was the first one on, remember, one debate stage in the presidential election that was the first one to say I supported because I could see the benefits. Wasn't perfect, but I could see the benefits. That is the place where Donald Trump should be negotiating his own trade agreement, whatever changes he wants to make with our relationships with Canada and Mexico. So I'm proud to be one of the original sponsors of this very important resolution. I love that we're picking up support. Tariffs as a whole, you literally read the words of Mitch McConnell and you read the words of Chuck Schumer when it comes to tariffs, they're nearly identical. That is unique. You look at the fact that the Chamber of Commerce has been out opposing the tariffs as a whole. I'm not talking about specific measures, but the tariffs as a whole, that the steelworkers have been out there, that the home builders have been out there because of the cost of lumber. This is across the board, across the country, a national sales tax on Americans. And this is the moment to take a stand and stand our ground with the power of Congress.
And now Senator Warner, as you know, Senator is on the Banking and Housing Committee, knows something through that about the housing cost effectiveness. He's on the Finance Committee, which works on trade issues, and then he's the lead Democrat on Intel, and Canada's been one of the stellar partners we've had for a very, very long time on Intel matters. Senator Mark Warner.
Thank you, Tim, and I'm proud to join you and Amy. Amy, you may have the ability to look at Canada from your third floor window. My mom's parents were Canadian,
Okay,
so I
you got me.
I got something there. And I just by happenstance, I know the incoming Prime Minister, Mark Carney, and current Prime Minister. And talked to him last night, and the reaction of, like, gosh, you know, kind of his head still spinning. Of, how did we get here? How did we get to a point that a nation has been, that we've probably next to Britain has had the closest relationships with since the founding of our nation, is being turned into an enemy? And a lot of this, you know, even when change, and I think, Dave, you may speak to this, you know, things change, because you never know what Trump, one day's on, one day's off. But that bitterness, that unwillingness to buy American products, that lack of trust that was created when this president, I believe, stupidly and potentially illegally threatened to throw Canada out of the Five Eyes partnership, that's not going to be papered over. A couple of quick points before I introduce our guests. You know, don't take my words about how much these tariffs are going to cost. Take the ever colorful Peter Navarro, who Trump's one of his trade people, says it will raise $100 billion off the car tariffs this year, $600 billion off the reciprocal tariffs, $700 billion tariff fees. Who's going to pay those? American consumers. This will be the largest tax increase on American consumers in modern times, in the story. And people will feel that, you know, literally in the coming days and weeks. If that was not bad enough, what are we seeing in terms of other economic reverberations? Read this morning, Canadian travel to the United States is down 75%. If you happen to be a place in Arizona or Florida where you love those snowbirds coming from Canada, chances are those revenues aren't going to come. And saying, hey, it was all a mistake, you don't repair this overnight. We've seen already Poland, Germany, Canada rethinking buying our F-35s. We don't treat them as allies, they may not purchase our military goods. We've heard from Microsoft, Amazon, Google, cloud providers that are saying, if we get on the wrong side of Trump, country X, are you going to be able to provide those services? So American IT services being cut back. The combination of all these factors, beyond the direct costs of the tariffs, is going to lead this economy into a recession. And Chuck Schumer said it best. Donald Trump didn't give a damn, no matter how high the prices are. This was the guy that was supposed to lower the prices of groceries, when he's doing absolutely the opposite, and time and again is making America less safe. So I'm going to skip all the horrible the stuff that my others have already said, and bring up our two guests. First of all, Bill from Port City, who is a brewer in my hometown in Alexandria. He relies on a lot of Canadian Pilsner to brew his best-selling beer. I can just tell you, as a former business guy myself, the idea of what he's had to go through over the last few weeks. When's it coming? Is it coming? How do you predict? Bill, why don't you share some of the examples firsthand of how this is affecting the business?
Thank you, Senator Warner. Yeah, our base malt, really the primary ingredient that goes into our beer, besides water, is Canadian Pilsner malt. It's a very specific strain of high-quality barley that grows in the cold climate of Canada. And there's not a suitable U.S. substitute that we can get of the same quality to make our beer. So we've relied on Canadian Pilsner malt for the past 14 years since we opened to brew our world-class quality beer. If there's a 25% tariff on this basic ingredient, it's going to slow our business down. We're going to have to raise our prices, and by the time it goes from us to our distributor, to the retailer, to the consumer, this $12.99 six-pack of beer is going to end up at $18.99. And so how many people are still going to want to buy a six-pack of great tasting beer, but at $18.99? People are going to start looking for a different substitute. Senator Warner mentioned the chaos that's being injected into the supply chain, and this is a direct effect of that. It's impossible for us to plan our business when we don't know what's going to happen, or when or if or how the tariffs are going to be implemented. So as a result, unfortunately, I had to lay off 2 of our key employees yesterday. That's 10% of our full-time workforce, just because of the uncertainty and the inability for us to be able to plan our production and our sales. So that's some of the real damage that we fear we're going to see with these tariffs on our Canadian, our base ingredient, the Pilsner malt.
And you know, those of you who are part of the resist, we can show a great sign of resistance if we all show up at Port City tomorrow afternoon and start drinking beer, maybe about 1 o'clock, right? So we can roll into the Votorama with a few beers under our belts. Dave Coutinho is the CEO of Reservoir Distillery in Richmond. He spent 20 years in this business. He has whiskeys that he sells all over the world. I want him to talk about, we have seen some of the effects already. I think it's in Alberta.
Yep.
The Canadian liquor stores are coming in and basically taking all of the American liquor off their shelves. I wonder, is it going to get put back when Trump says, oops, we screwed up? This could have huge long-term ramifications. Dave, talk about this one.
Thank you, Senator Warner, and thank you, senators, for having me today and giving a voice to small business. I'm one of many. We make up, I believe, about 50% of private payrolls in the country. And what I want to talk to you about is how we are already directly affected by this Canadian rhetoric and tariffs as well. We have a business that we're building in Western Canada. And I was actually in Western Canada selling out inventory on a market visit and came back on January 20th. And within a week, everything changed. By the beginning of March, I had a message from my distributor in Alberta, and the real message was, one, that Alberta had pulled all of our product off the shelves, but also, more importantly, the Canadian consumer, furious, frustrated, not understanding why, may not be coming back. And that is something that very much is almost, people might think, secondary to what's going on to the tariffs, because tariffs can be lifted, but a consumer not coming back is even worse. Okay? So we're on a timeline here. And, timelines are like rubber bands where you can stretch them out. And sometimes, if you do that, you remove the tariff, it comes back, okay. But we're also at a point now where we're very fastly approaching a critical point where that rubber band is going to break and that consumer won't come back.
Yeah.
And that is the worst possible scenario. So what really needs to happen is action. I'm extraordinarily appreciative that all the senators are actually getting behind this bill and working and standing up to actually say and do something. That's what we witnessed today. and I'm glad that they're getting this done. Thank you.
Let me
Jim
just say,
took the lead, so let's
Yeah,
just
yeah,
leave
yeah,
it
yeah.
there.
This is the guy.
He is
All
the
right.
junior senator, but he
I am the junior senator. I'm such a young man. One other point. We have a third witness who was going to be here today. Something came up. Philip Glaze from Winchester, who runs apple orchards. And a lot of their apples get sold in Canada, exported to Canada. And what we see is, since there's never been a one-sided trade war in world history, as soon as the U.S. takes steps, the Canadians put on retaliatory tariffs. And who they tend to go after is ag and forestry. So he was going to talk about the declining market for American apples in Canada as a result. Everywhere you go, we all have the stories. I have a little bakery, Mom's Apple Pie in Northern Virginia. They have 3 locations. April, the owner, said, "You got to do something about these tariffs." I said, "April, you just have a small bakery with 3 places. I mean, how do the tariffs affect you?" She goes, "Pie tins, aluminum pie tins, they all come from Canada. You raise the price of a pie tin by 25%. Nobody has to buy an apple pie." So a whole lot of people quit buying apple pie. This affects, as Dave said, the smallest businesses get really, really hit by this, and they have sometimes the least ability to deal with the excess prices compared to some of the larger businesses. But with that, we're glad to open it up. Take questions, please.
Yeah, Senator Kaine, even if this resolution does pass, it doesn't do anything to actually overturn the tariffs. So is this meant to just send a message to the White House?
No, it actually, I mean, it has to go to the House. So if it passes in the Senate, and we hope with some bipartisan support, then we got to work on the House. Then it would go to the White House, and the president could veto it. But it actually turns off the emergency that is the basis for the 10 and 25% tariffs. There are other kinds of tariffs that can be imposed, but this one would turn off the Canadian emergency, and the 10 and 25% tariffs would go away. We obviously have got step 1 in the Senate, then in the House, on to the White House. But we think that the economic chaos that's being caused, and markets being roiled, and consumer confidence dropping, and some predicting recession, together with a bipartisan vote, might convince the White House, hey, look, there's a better way to treat American citizens and customers.
Senator Kaine.
Please.
Yes, hi. I'm Azeb from Radio Canada. Why do you think some elected officials are not willing to support your bill? Why is there resistance?
Well,
There's a lot that are.
Yeah, Republicans aren't yet willing to stand up to the president. Republicans here, our colleagues, they're embarrassed by 51st State or Governor Trudeau. They're embarrassed by this stuff because they view Canada as a great ally. But they got to be willing to stand up. They've said they're concerned about tariffs. Okay, fine, you're concerned. Now we're giving you a vote. You can stop them if you want to. So we're asking everybody to have a backbone, be the Article 1 branch. Trade is supposed to be an Article 1 responsibility, not an executive responsibility. So stand up for your constituents and say no tax increase on it.
Senator Kaine.
Senator Klobuchar, Senator, do these tariffs put us in violation of USMCA? What is the impact next year when we have to renegotiate the treaty?
Well,
and if I could, do you see any positive side to this if the worst trade offenders do lower their tariffs?
okay, so first of all, I've always been okay with targeted tariffs, and there have been some smart targeted tariffs over history when someone is misbehaving and you want to use them. That's not what this is. This is across the board, exorbitant, 25%. You heard what that adds to their supply chains. And then it is also beyond even Canada with countries. And of course, it violates all kinds of things. Donald Trump doesn't seem to care if he violates things. And the point that we're making up here is our colleagues over in the Senate should not be subjects to a king, okay? We are an independent, co-equal branch of government that's got to speak out. And I have not heard an issue like this. Of all the things that have been going on, and the chaos up, the corruption up, the costs up, as these tariffs that our Republican colleagues behind closed doors are telling us, keep going, keep going, keep doing this. Go away, go do this, because this is just decimating our businesses in our state. So this is the moment they can stand up. In general, if only 4 of them stood up on so many of these things, including the tax cuts for the billionaires or whatever else they're doing, that would be it. 4 of them, just 4 of them need to stand up. like Senator Booker is doing right now on that Senate floor.
Well, Senator Grassley told us this morning that Congress needs to reclaim its Commerce Clause authority, and he's got a bill to do that.
Okay, well, we welcome his vote for this measure then, because this is the way to go right here.
Senator Klobuchar, right now in Canada, Canadians are so angry.
They are. When they boo at hockey games with Minnesota, we know things are gone awry. It's bad.
What would you say to Canadians in this moment who are making those choices to say, I don't want to buy American, and they see this as a turning point in the relationship, and they don't necessarily want to go back?
So we want them back. They have so many friends here that care about Canada deeply, that see them as our best ally in the world. We share this biggest border. We have had this relationships that's helped with security, and it's helped with everything from our trade and our economies and making our countries so much stronger together. So we want them back. These businesses need them back, and so many people do not agree with what Donald Trump is doing right now. So we ask them to support us in what we're doing here, to stand with us, and then once we have a victory, whether it is with this measure or whether it's in the future, that they come back strong. And I'm going to be there at the hockey games, and I will note the women's hockey game, the new league we've started with 3 teams in the U.S., including Minnesota. I want to be there standing with them cheering. And I don't blame them for being angry. They have every right to be angry. They shouldn't be treated like this.
I think, let me just add on that. I think it's incumbent, I've not had a chance because we were talking with some of the Canadian officials yesterday. I think a big bipartisan group of us in the Senate need to stand up and say we view Canada as a strong ally, as a friend, as a country that is totally interconnected with our economy, and make clear that this is the action of one guy, but not even the majority of his own party, at least on the Canada issue. But I also think we need to make clear that we're going to require our national security apparatus to be more careful. The idea that we would throw Canada out of the Five Eyes, or the idea last week where they put classified information on an unsecure commercial channel that could have cost lives. I know we are hearing from our allies, including Canadians, are going to say, do I want to share intelligence with this gang that can't shoot straight in terms of keeping classified information classified? Do I want to actually stand shoulder to shoulder with a long-term ally where you've got a political leader undercutting that ally and insulting that ally on a daily basis? Canadians got a right to be pissed. We got a responsibility to step up as bipartisan members of the Senate and say, no, we reject this policy, we affirm this long-term friendship.
If this is successful, would you be interested in trying to change the structure of the 232 law so that an imported Chrysler minivan from Canada and lumber from Canada is not considered a national security risk? It seems like the idea of what is national security is being stretched to the breaking point when you're saying that 2x4s are national security.
I think many of us have signed on to larger reform bills like the Grassley bill that was mentioned, where we've just given too much power over the exec over many years. IEPA was never supposed to be used in these circumstances. But I don't think anybody should say, well, let's do a comprehensive reform and we'll wait for that while taxes are going up every day in our constituents. We can stop this right now. And then, yes, let's look at, is there a better way to reform these tariffs?
So you talk about stopping these taxes right now, but you also say the vote's a little bit in flux because of Senator Booker speaking and occupying the Senate floor. In your view, what is this 15 going on 16 going on speech accomplishing, pushing your vote back?
Oh, look, it is. I think we were all there with Corey. Corey had, last we saw, like 59 million views of people, and of course he did, because any of us who are doing town hall meetings, you had an overflow room down in Hampton Roads. You've been doing them. People are tired of the chaos. Like, who wanted chaos? Who wanted chaos? Who wants a stock market that's declining? Who wants the Atlanta Fed predicting we're going to go into a recession and have, reverse economic growth? Who wants to see prices going up? Who wants to see us shredding alliances around the globe? People don't want to see that. And so that's what Corey is speaking to. And, you know, it's time for people who believe in the values of this country to stand up like Cory Booker's doing, and we think that's what we're doing with this.
And I love that it's going to be the first big vote after that, because I think it makes the point.
Again,
We're
we're
united
not
on
asking for the whole world to change. We're asking for 4 Republican senators to actually go on record what they've all said privately. They're aghast at the tariffs. They're aghast at the economic turmoil. They are insanely crazed by the carelessness around classified information. But you can't be silenced. Silence leads to more of this, and as Steve and David indicated, you know, Trump comes out, wakes up tomorrow morning and says, well, never mind. You say never mind, but there's still uncertainty. Will it come back? And will those Alberta customers buy American whiskey? You know, those are long-term ramifications. Will Canada vote with us when we're standing? Of course, if we vote again with Russia and North Korea and Belarus and deny factual basis about who started the war, they shouldn't vote with us. But this damage that's being done, you know, America's strength has come from its hard power, its economic power, but also its soft power and its alliances. And on every one of those categories, this crowd is undermining us.
All right, this is a start.
Okay.
Thank you very
I
much.
just want to get one of those beers